Hey Donald, how are you today?
Good. How are you, Justin?
I'm good. I'm good. It's things are pretty bright here in California. You're in Florida, correct?
I am. I'm in a little bit of paradise just outside of Orlando.
Nice. Um, so I noticed the logo on your shirt. Tell me a little bit about Whiskey Systems.
Yes, whiskey systems. We I started Whiskey Systems in 2013, and we have over 400 distilleries using Whiskey Systems to track everything from inventory to distillery operations, keep in full compliance with TTB records, and it'll do all of the TTB records and reports and federal excise tax returns that you need to do to not go to jail. So that's always positive.
Always a good idea to not go to jail. Speaking of jail, you're fairly well versed in the TTB, which is the Alcohol Regulatory Administration, essentially that it kind of governs what a great deal of our industry deals with. Let's jump in and talk a little bit about some of the COVID regulations, the changes that have been made to some of the rules and regs, and how that's impacted distillers now, and how it's probably going to impact them for a while.
Yeah, great question. So, as we all know, we're in the middle of a pandemic, and for the most part, all the craft distillery gift shops and tasting rooms and cocktail bars, they're all shut down. And the TTB and the FDA were very quick and were very responsive to open up regulations to allow craft distilleries to uh, make hand sanitizer, which has been great. Um, an interesting bit of trivia, the TTB is actually the second largest source of income for the federal government, second only to the IRS. So the TTB collects excise taxes on alcohol, tobacco, firearms, and possibly soon to be cannabis. Um, and then working with the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration, they've been able to very quickly respond to the pandemic and allow distillers some really cool flexibility to make hand sanitizer for first responders, for their community, for donations, for sale, and they've been incredibly responsive and very easy to work with to help craft distilleries' life become just a little bit easier during the pandemic.
Nice.
They
Sorry. So we're talking about some of the changes that the TTB is making, and you were saying.
Yeah, so the COVID-19 pandemic really started, let's call it early March. And by March 26th, which is relatively quick, the TTB had already set guidance and helpful information to craft distilleries on a guidance. And then March 30th, they created a whole resource webpage for COVID-19 questions and resources. And then March 31st, they announced a 90-day postponement of all federal excise tax due for all distilleries in the United States, which has been a huge win for craft distilleries who don't have the cash to pay for the first quarter FET or those that pay every 15 days. They get a 90-day relief. And then on April 1st, which I thought for sure was an April Fool's joke, they came out with 100 pages of regulations that they were softening and changing, everything from improved tolerance for bottle proofing, no restrictions on barrel sizes, the ability to do barrel-aged gin, with more positive changes coming. So really, starting around mid-March to really early April, the TTB and the FDA have given great guidance, and they've been excellent in helping craft distilleries kind of respond to this.
Fantastic. Yeah, on April 1st, I know you probably did the same thing I did. Grabbed a bottle of whiskey, got in the bathtub, and read all 100 pages.
Well, I did, and my team did. We've got our customer service supervisor, Jennifer Norris, who works on the Whiskey Systems team. She meticulously went through every single change, documented them, and then we sent those changes out to the Whiskey Systems team and said, hey, the Whiskey Systems family, and said, hey, these are important updates. And then I think we even did a webinar to help everyone understand those changes. So it's been, we keep very close contact with the TTB on any sort of changes to regulatory issues, tax changes, and of course with the new COVID resources, hand sanitizer, FDA guidance. We've been keeping our finger on that pulse and and keeping our customers and the distilling industry as updated as best we can.
Which is good, because there's a lot of, not misinformation, but just there's a lot of information to start with. And
Yes.
you know how it is with the game of telephone. You learn one regulation or learn one rule, go to a conference, and suddenly it's people are talking about the same rule 7 different ways.
Yep.
And no one has very few people have a full understanding of what's happening, including, unfortunately, the TTB, the FDA,
Yeah.
the local ABCs,
Yeah.
who no one seems to be on the same page, and that's unfortunate. It seems like this might have looked very, not to minimize what's going on in the world today, but there might be a little bit of a silver lining as far as understanding the industry a little bit better, and regulations changing and being focused in on things that need to be fixed immediately. The TTB,
Yeah.
as you know, it's not an organization that usually does things quickly. it's
Yes.
it's slow going, as is a lot of bureaucracy, and this to be able to turn around with uh, you know things that actually help immediately.
Yep.
Getting rid of the federal excise tax, for having that kind of having that cushion, changing a little bit of the rules about our next subject, which is hand sanitizer.
Yeah. Yeah.
I thought it was crazy when I found out that suddenly all of these distillers who aren't really ramping up production because nobody's buying it, because no restaurants, bars, or anything else is open, so they can't make something to sell it. And most of these craft distillers aren't in nationwide chains or Costco or Total Wine or anything like that, so they can't keep filling the shelves there. So they turn production to hand sanitizer. And I find,
Yeah. Yeah.
as do they, and most of them, they still have to pay a shit ton of taxes. So let's jump into sanitizer.
Well, the good thing is that the TTB has said for distilleries that are making hand sanitizer, assuming they're following the FDA guidance, which is denaturing it, they don't have to pay tax. So that is really exciting. Um, you know, Traditionally, I guess, as early this year, if you decided that you wanted to make a non-beverage product, so like a hand sanitizer, or an industrial product, an industrial denatured spirit, you'd have to get an application, you'd have to fill out an application, you have to get approval, you'd have to get formula approval. And what they did, the TTB said, look, as long as you're following the World Health Organization recipe, you don't have to get an additional license, you don't have to fill out the application, you don't have to get formula approval, just follow these handful of recipes and get the right ingredients, and then you can just make it, you don't have to pay tax on it, and then you can use it as donation, or as long as you're following FDA, you can sell it to your community and sell it at your gift shop. And that's been a world of difference for a lot of craft distillers, because if your primary business model is all the foot traffic coming in, paid tours, paid sampling, cocktail sales, bottle sales coming to your distillery, if you're forced to shut down, it was great to be able to fall back on hand sanitizer production, and then be able to make a difference for their community. And so we've seen a ton of craft distillers, kind of find that silver lining from this pandemic to not make a ton of money, not profit on the pandemic, but been able to give back to their employees, keep them employed, and also help their community. Well, the other thing that's silver lining from all this, and again, I don't want to sugarcoat it, because it's really rough for a lot of craft distillers, and I can kind of go into that later. But one silver lining is that it's really motivated certain states and certain counties to soften all the things that craft distillers want, like cocktails to go, curbside bottle pickup, ordering and shipment. Whereas even last year, states were like, well, you couldn't do that at all. Like, that would be crazy. And now we've seen communities and states and counties soften up to things like cocktails to go. And hopefully these are regulations that are going to stay around for a long time, because we want to deliver spirits and products to consumers where they want it. If they don't feel comfortable coming into our tasting room, well, we want to do curbside pickup. If they want to do online ordering, we want to be able to direct sell. If they want to come in and have a cocktail, we want to have that safely available to them as well. So to open up these different business models is going to be a big win for craft distillers.
So in California, there's quite a few law changes as far as the ABC allowing things like cocktails to go, which previously was a no-go, as you mentioned, in many states, Florida and some other states. I'm curious, is the country ready to basically become Bourbon Street? And shouldn't we be that anyway, as far as regulations go?
Yeah, so Florida, that's a good example. So in Florida, we're a tourism state, right? We're a hospitality state. And the license to sell cocktails, spirit cocktails, is very expensive. And that's something that local restaurants and local bars value a lot. And craft distilleries, to be able to open up and just sell cocktails, would be in direct competition with that license. So Florida has not allowed cocktails for craft distilleries or cocktails to go. That it's still staying with the bar. So it would be nice if craft distilleries in Florida could at least get that license. I know it's very expensive and not a lot of them can afford it, but sort of soften that up. But you look at New York, who have been very progressive. Their craft distillery laws allow for direct distribution from craft distilleries to a bar or a retailer or a restaurant, and now they're allowing cocktails to go. So it's good, and hopefully these regulations will stay around. I would love for, after this CARES Act, the CARES Act that was passed, which opened up a whole lot of resources to craft distillers. Again, that 90-day extension, not requiring the industrial license to make hand sanitizer. I hope that some of those things stick around because, whether it's this pandemic or the flu, it's always good that craft distillers can have a secondary source of income with hand sanitizer. So in theory, after the CARES Act expires, if distilleries want to continue to make hand sanitizer and continue to be that resource for their community and first responders and hospitals and policemen and firemen, they're going to have to go and get that license and apply for different reports and kind of been burdened by additional administrative. So I hope that the ability to run a certain number of formulas and do a certain amount of blending without any additional administrative burden, I hope that sticks around, because that'd be a great win for craft distilleries all over the country.
Sure. When does the CARES Act expire?
Well, so it's interesting. The 90-day extension for craft distilleries in terms of the taxes really it started in May, and then the July 14th federal excise tax is due on that date. So you're going to be paying your March federal excise tax after your July taxes are due. So it would be great, if it's going to happen, if they could continue that 90-day extension, at least giving distilleries another 90 days to pay it for the rest of the year. That would be excellent. If not, if they don't do anything, the July federal excise tax and August excise taxes are going to be due here in a couple months. They'll still have a little bit of delay for the March, April, and May and June, but come July 1, it's back to normal. You really only have a handful of days to pay the excise tax after it's due.
So given all of this information, given all the craziness that's happening, how can craft distillers really kind of keep track of this? How, other than keeping a whiskey system, having you install or tracking your data, how can these distillers really keep up with what's going on?
Yeah, great question. There's a ton of information out there, and there's the great organization. So one of the biggest things the TTB has said, as they're giving quick guidance and changing guidance over time, is to record everything, record records of everything that they do. And of course, Whiskey Systems is great for that. They can track what they're batching, what they're denaturing with, what spirits are using, what taxes owed, things like that. And you know, we at the Whiskey Systems team are keeping our finger on the pulse, and we're disseminating knowledge as soon as we get it. But you know, outside of the Whiskey Systems family, there's a lot of great resources. American Craft Spirits Association, the ACSA has a great website where they are not only are they working directly with the TTB and the FDA, they're updating a whole gamut of resources that craft distillers can go and look through and update. The TTB, if you're a distiller and you haven't already checked the TTB website, you can subscribe to updates and you can subscribe to their emails, and that's always great. The Whiskey Systems Facebook page, every time we get new information, we share it there. And then of course, whiskeysystems.com, we also have a page that's public facing with all of the there's a lot out there, but there's a lot of great resources to do, and whether it's ACSA, BI, everyone's trying to help the industry as much as they can. So the good news is, for a distiller, you know, pick any one of these resources and then you can connect with them and stay up to date. Again, the biggest takeaway though is no matter what system you're using, is that if you're a distiller sanitizer, record, write everything down, track every gallon, every proof gallon that you're using, so that if you were to get audited, for example, you've got that transparent daily logs and records to show what you were trying to do. Even if you don't do it perfectly, make sure you write everything down, follow the FDA guidance, use proper denaturing, and if you do all of that, not only do you not have to pay tax on your hand sanitizer, but you should be in good shape in case anyone comes knocking.
And all of those links, by the way, are below, so you can definitely click on those. Whiskey Systems, ADI, ACSA, Mr. Rogers, whoever, they're all down there in the YouTube links. I'm curious, Don, how in the hell do you know all this stuff?
Well, I like to tell people I've been drinking for a living and keeping people out of jail for over 15 years now. I actually, out of college, I started in the water business actually, and I got a phone call from a recruiter saying, "Hey, would you like to drink bourbon for a living?" And I was like, "Yes, I would like that very much." You know, in my early 20s, going and drinking bourbon for a living is a pretty good deal. And I started as the barrel warehouse manager for the Buffalo Trace Distillery. Without exaggerating, a part of my job was to taste Pappy Van Winkle and Blanton's and Elmer T. Lee and George T. Stagg before that they were bottled. And I worked for the master distiller, Harlan Wheatley. It was amazing. It was one of the coolest jobs I've ever had. But the job was to automate and improve the record keeping so that when the TTB audited the distillery, and they do all big distilleries every 3 years, that my department would be ready to go. So I made all sorts of automation and improvements, kind of bringing them up to the 21st century. And then I took over the Blanton's Bowling Hall and automated kind of the record keeping for bottling and processing, and then later distribution and customer service and logistics. So every part from grain coming in to barreling to bottling to distribution, my job was to make sure that all those departments were in full compliance with TTB reporting. And it's interesting, no matter you're shipping 10, 20 million cases a year as a distillery, or you've got a 15-gallon still selling 100 cases a year, you both are under the same regulations. You fill out the same reports. You file the same operations, production, storage, processing report. So that sort of across the distillery experience helped me build Whiskey Systems as it is today. And then, I worked for Buffalo Trace for about 7 years. And then a company called MGP bought the Seagram's distillery, and they recruited me to come in and do a similar job, implement an ERP system, make sure everything was great. And then I left there and started as a consultant for craft distilleries from across the country. So really my job is to make sure that craft distilleries know what the requirements are to be in full compliance, make sure they're making money, make sure that their cost of goods are being tracked, make sure they're profitable, and then also make sure that they, in the event they get audited, they don't go to jail and they're doing everything above board. So I guess you could say 15 years of compliance experience now all funneled down into whiskey systems.
Funneled. Ba-dum-bum.
Yeah.
Nice. Well, Donald Snyder, thank you so much for coming on.
Of course.
Again, those links are all down below for those watching. Stay tuned. Donald and I are going to keep the conversation going in episode 2, the second Whiskey Systems episode.
Thank you so
Cheers.
much. Cheers.